Hi again. Again, it is day 2 of Indie Jam. Thank you so much for being here. Um, we do have a camera. We're recording all of these. It's going on YouTube. So hello, YouTube audience, and hello, audience behind the camera. Yeah, woo! But yeah, let's just kickstart into this. As you can see, the title of the panel is The Art of Getting Noticed, right? We're at an indie gaming event. We're all from games media or some form of media. And I just thought it would be really interesting if we shared a little bit about some of the thought process that goes into how we decide which indie games get picked up on our publications, what causes indie games to stand out, as well as just a little bit about how we got into the media business, right? So let's start with just a round of introductions. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jonathan Kakucho. I made my start in the games media side when I was when I was still in Canada back in 2006, 7. Well, there was a small portal named Dark Diamond. I was doing work for free, as how it is back in the day, because I had a proper job at the time there, and then just worked out. And then when I came back to Malaysia, I applied around here and there, see if there's any way I can actually take my profession to the next level. And I was surprisingly picked up by Game Access, the Singapore Game Access. So I took a bus down, did my interview, and on the same day, I think the big game that came out was Guitar Hero 3. Anyone remembers that?
Oh man.
Yeah. I bought the guitar, everything and all that, brought that back on the bus, boom. So it was an interview and a shopping spree on the same day itself. And then I guess 2 weeks later, I got hired and had to move to Singapore at the time. And this began my 10-year journey in games media. So I was at Game Access for a couple of years, and then GameSpot opened a branch. I went for that. And then after a couple of years, after that, we had some good times here and there, and I learned a lot, everything here and there. But all good things have to come to an end, and business reasons. I'm sure you guys know about the whole GameSpot thing that happened recently, so that there's a bunch of layoffs here and there going on, which really sucks, but that's unfortunately turnover rate. It has been happening since my time, around 2011 onward. So it's unfortunately nothing new, and it's not going to be changing anytime since. And then I did a bit of PR stint here and there around 2014 onward. I actually did work at Gumi at one point doing PR, so that's from the other side of the fence, and then that was when my viewpoint just started expanding further and further. And then I came back to Malaysia after my tenure has passed and all that. I figured come back home, rethink my life assessment and all that. And then my business partner Ken from IGN approached to me and just said, "Hey, you want to help me out?" And then I said, "Yeah, sure." That was a deeper conversation, but I don't want to too much detail. But the point is, we started it from late 2018, and then I guess haven't looked back since. And I'm just doing what I can to make KKP survive and do what they can. So far, we have a TV show out, we have a YouTube channel, we have a website, and some radio presence here and there. So, yeah, it's just been a pretty wild ride, I have to say, and it's still a ride since. But then again, nothing you love is ever easy, right? Okay, and I think that's pretty much it.
Wow, that's a powerful liner to end on. And Juan, you?
Okay, so my name is Juan Amiral. I have been a games journalist since 2017. And I'm going to tell a story that's going to resonate with a lot of you, which is I grew up during the angry YouTuber era. So every single person, I assure you, every single guy has had that dream of, oh man, I wanna make a video where I'd be like, this game sucks, what are the developers thinking? And so I literally just went out. There was a site at the time called Fundever. Shout out to Michelle. I was like, yo, I want to scream about video games. Do you know how I can do that? And she was like, I'm going to hook you up with these guys from Gamer Malaya. They're actually over there in the crowd over there. What's up, man? And they were like, we can't pay you, but we can give you space. And so that's how that started. And then, through that experience, I got to meet game developers. And I was like, you know what? Games are actually pretty cool. And just dunking on them is not actually very fun after the first time. And so then I turned it into a real career. Around 2020, I worked at some other site we won't bother talking about. And then starting this year, I started working at Nimia Gaming, where more of my focus goes to indie games like the people at Indie Jam. So yeah, no, I think that's pretty much my story in brief.
Awesome. I think based on the timeline that you guys have provided, it seems that the longer you work in games media, the more casual you become because you've shown up in a freaking bow tie and blazer, and then at the other end we have Hawaiian shirt.
Okay, so this is a secret piece of tech, which is basically you just see how many people in the games industry and gamers in general dress the same, and you're like, I need to be as different as possible.
It's working. It's working. And we gotta take a picture to prove this later. But yeah, and just a little bit of background on me. I'm obviously a little bit more on the event side. I'm the organizer of Indie Jam. But the Magic Rain also has a publication, but I wouldn't call it strictly a games media. We cover a lot of pop culture, we do a lot of anime and cosplay, and we cover a lot of Malaysian events, including games related stuff, from esports to indie games. I can't claim to have as big of a media history as these guys, but it's been a great pleasure getting to know some of the players within the local games media site. With that, I do want to jump into sort of the first question. Since you've been in games media for quite some time, how has the industry evolved since when you first joined in the industry?
Oh, thanks. I think evolution. What's the opposite of evolution? Sorry. But anyway, the point is, it has been changing. Yes, you are correct. From my time in 2008 onward, traditional media has definitely evolved, and I'm not sure if it's for the better. I think everyone might be familiar with what happened when it was around 2014 onward, when there was this whole thing called Gamergate that started, where a lot of agendas started propping up more than actually covering the game and how it's designed and whether it's good, as in reviewing a product. Now, don't get me wrong, commenting on the social political climate of a game is good, but don't make it too much of a focus. There got to be a balance, per se. And as it's evolved, like right now, I think YouTubers, content creators definitely are have bigger sway when you compare to traditional media, where they are relying so much more on their advertisers, whereas for your content creators like Austin Interruption or Super Eye Patch Wolf, or even people like Woolly Versus or Pat Stares At, right? Yeah, they, because of their Let's Play lineage, they are getting codes and all that, and they are at their own fan base and everything, and they are getting even more viewership and more people coming into the shows or whatnot compared to your typical writer or your journalist in your big publications like Kotaku and whatnot. There are people around, there are outliers like Jason Schreier, but even then, they left their previous home base and now they're in other companies here and there. It's their name they're bringing about. So it has evolved, yes, but as for whether it's better or worse, that's really up for you to decide, because at the end of the day, it's how you perceive it. Like, for my side, it's a bit tough because we are still balancing that fine line between being a journalist, being a critic, and being a content creator. It's
Yeah.
tough.
If you don't mind me asking, could you give me a snapshot of what the ratio looks like then compared to now? Because from my understanding of how games media and how the industry used to report on games, it was pretty much if you wanted to buy a game, you go and read a review about it.
Yeah, on the
right?
magazine, yes.
Yeah. And now with like content creators and everything, so how has that ratio shifted? Like in terms of the overall media ecosystem, right? Like how many percentage is that still?
Ooh, I think people are listening more to content creators because they're faster at putting stuff up. But the thing is, journalists, they all do their research, and these are the people you should follow. Unfortunately, because of how social media works, where the fastest gun that's fired will hit its target, mostly. People will follow the one that comes out first rather than following the one that's actually correct. Which should be, I mean, to be honest, it should be the other way around, but unfortunately, I'm not the majority right now. So I guess it's also about building credibility that works in the end, but people will believe Jason Schreier more than your random VTuber who's grifting people online, per se.
Oh, you don't know that.
Yes, exactly, yes. But I think you have more experience about like sifting, cooking information per se, right?
Yeah, okay. So like my answer to this question is very bleak which is I think that audiences in general have less of an appetite for what's true and more of an appetite for what they want to be true. So shit like Gamergate like has literally ruined all of our lives, and legitimately, because it's one of those things where like to be a games journalist is to now invite harassment into your life. The moment you say something unpopular, and there's this like I use the term like capital G gamer, which is that this very stubborn type of reader. They believe what they believe, and anyone who believes otherwise is a shill, a puppet, whatever term you want to. It's the most like divorced from reality thing you've ever seen, and every couple years it starts up again. I think now, especially like the way social media works, social media is such a very good funnel for just the worst feelings you can think of, that it manages to turn, like everyone's like, oh, you know, these game journalists are just a bunch of lazy people who sit around gobbling up free codes. Meanwhile, this streamer who lives in their own filth is the only paragon of justice out there. Man can't be bothered to do a single Google search, but he's the right one.
But yeah, even on our side, even though we're not dedicated games media, right? I've definitely seen the evolution of format with regards to content, right? More and more, the content that even we put out under the Magic Rain has to sort of fit almost the content creator formats and structures, right? Like we want to get the content out ASAP, right? Because if you get it out first, you're gonna be there first in front of as many people's eyes as possible. But also you want to keep it snappy. And there's this sort of, how to say, shortening overall, I think, of like if you want to make a point, you have to make it fast. And if you want to have like a more nuanced thing, let's say in the form of a long form review, you kind of have to accept, especially from the point of like an editor, right? I have to accept that nobody's going to click in to read it, because that's just how I think the readership and audience functions these days.
If you're gonna write like a nice, long, fancy, nuanced review, be prepared for you to be the only reader of it. That's basically.
Definitely.
Anyone else, that's an extra, but at least write a review that you like.
Yeah. I do want to pivot a little bit to indie gaming, right? Because the games media landscape that I know as like the traditional games media landscape has always been very AAA dominated, right? Mm-hmm. How has that changed with the introduction of more and more indie games getting media spotlight? Has it been sort of like a general evolution of appetite where more people want to see indie games and so games media answering the call? Or do you feel like it's opposite? Or how has your experience been with that?
Okay, so like for what's happened is that there is not one monolithic group of gamers. There's two, because I'm sure all of you people in the audience, you know that one guy, FIFA till the day he dies, no matter what. There's always gonna be that guy who plays every Call of Duty. Blizzard could shoot a man, and the next Call of Duty they won. Those are those gamers. They are very set in their ways. They do not care. And then there is the other type of gamer and these are who indie games target. This is the gamer who, I want a new experience. Show me something new. And they're more likely to be bored with the AAA experience, because at the end of the day, AAA games are the same like 6 traits shuffled around and occasionally given a bit of juice if they so desire, you know? Like at the end of the day, Last of Us is still a third-person shooter. You know, Horizon is still another over-the-shoulder game. Halo is still Halo. It's still a first-person shooter and all that stuff. So the good thing about indie games, and we've seen so many of them in the past decade, is that they present a lens of like, well, would you like to see something you've never seen before? Would you like to feel something you've never felt before? And I think that's the role that indie games plays. They feed that particular audience. That being said, when you talk about AAA domination, do you see a space for the Unbound on the side of a bus?
Maybe if we gave a space for the Unbound enough money. We could put them
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
bus.
That's the keyword.
Yeah.
That's the money. So no, AAA will still be dominating, but just like how Taylor Swift will continue to re-release her albums so that she can be number one for as long as possible, that doesn't mean that Wynton Marsalis doesn't have to exist anymore. There's still people out there who want to see Wynton Marsalis perform.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment. Although it's good that the space has been really great for indie games, not just for Asia, but just basically around the world. There are actually more of these titles cropping up. It does help that, again, making a AAA game will take you 5 years, 3 years, depending on how screwed up your company is. And whereas making an indie title, it can take from within a month to 6 months to even 2 years. It all varies. But then at the end of the day, it's someone's vision actually coming to life, and also getting help from a publisher's backing, which hopefully works out for the best. And again, like Juan said, creative ideas are always going to be coming out here and there. I mean, this year we already had like Until Then from Philippines, and I believe I played a really nice horror game. It was called Crow Country. I think it was made by like 3 people, and it was really, really good. I mean, you're not gonna see EA. Okay, maybe they can because they got the original line, but that's very rare to see a big publisher fund like a horror game that has the fixed camera angles half the time and having Final Fantasy VII Popeye eye graphics. It's very rare, and I'm happy that we've got Steam, we've got so many good old games, especially, or even itch.io, having these games popping up per se. But it's also our job in a sense to make sure that we try to amplify the voices, especially if a game is something that's, hey, this is a good idea. I want to use my platform to spread the word and so forth.
I think I speak for all of us when I say that the publications here and the publications supporting Indie Gem all care about amplifying indie voices, right? And we all see the value in amplifying these people who are telling stories that have not been told, right? What I want to know now is there are so many indie games now. Back when we were all just getting into it, indie was still sort of like gathering its legs, and there were maybe a couple that rose above, just in the previous panel, they were talking about Undertale. You talk about Stardew Valley, and that was then that idea of what indie games were. And now there are just so many, So I want to ask the question of, when it comes to shining the spotlight on indies, because we have limited time, we're all overworked, we have limited space on our publications. What traits do you look for in an indie game in order to decide, hey, I want to pick this up for my publication?
That's a very good question. I will just see what is completely different in terms of if the art style gets me the attention, or even just a simple concept. I think this is why in game development, X factors are very important. You gotta have a one-sentence pitch for your game. Like my favorite game of this year is basically Slay the Spire meets poker. That's it. That's more than enough. One sentence, quick to the point, and that was gonna get everyone interested. So it's really varied here and there. If there's an email I get from a very passionate developer, and they come to me, and it's not like a press release email you see from a company or a template or a chat AI kind of PR thing. It has to be, you gotta have some spelling error here and there if possible. And also just say that I come out with a nice story, a nice little pitch, and hopefully I'm not too busy. I'll pick that up and just take a look. Again, it's always about the X factor and the pitch itself that will sell you in, because like you mentioned, we don't have enough time. We don't have all the time in the world, especially for people who are not just indie focused. They're juggling like AAA, single A, or even mobile games or indie and whatnot. So again, time is very limited, and it's also about being polite. Just because one email does not go to your favorite content creator, there are many more, and you just gotta do your research about whether it's the kind of thing they like or not, or we like or not. You want to add?
Oh yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, like, as actual tangible advice for indie devs to use, it helps to research the people in your media landscape, because ultimately we're people, and that means that we're gonna like the things that we like. Like, my favorite indie game this year is a game called Slave Zero X, and it's literally just a 2D beat 'em up with Roman cancels from Guilty Gear in it. Like, I can't make an objective argument for why this game rules. It just gets me. But that being said, as media, your job is also to not be too limited by your own biases. Like, I'm not very big into management sims, but at Gamescom Asia, we got to check out Let's Build a Dungeon. And that game might be one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. So on one hand, we have to keep that open mind for our work and allow ourselves to be surprised. But ultimately, like, it starts with, can you play to our like, specific interests kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you bring up, and kind of an interesting perspective, because I think it is definitely in the thought frame when they're approaching a content creator. Like, you wouldn't approach a content creator who doesn't play horror games to play a horror game, for example, because the likelihood of them picking it up is not that strong. So if you happen to get to know the journalists in your sphere and you want to talk to somebody who is likely going to cover your game, take the same approach, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. I mean, like, in the case of content creators, for them it can be part of their brand. But so the important thing when you see like journalists on like social media and stuff, like that's us on our day off basically. For those of us, like we're tweeting our food pics, our gym pics or whatever. So you can learn a bit from there. They can be like, oh yeah, this guy really likes Wicked. What if I send him my game inspired by Wicked in cinemas like later this month, whatever.
I like Wicked too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But let's narrow it down, right? So if I were an indie game and I wanted to get noticed by you guys, right? What would be the best sort of like golden rule strategies to follow in terms of reaching out? Yeah, in terms of reaching out.
Okay, so the absolute first one is, again, like I said, figure out who those journalists are, what they like, and if you were at Burhan's talk yesterday, oh, damn it, he left. But if you were at Burhan's talk yesterday, he mentioned, find a reason to get in. So, if your game has like sick combos, like then message them, be like, hey, our game has sick combos. Can you please play our game since you like to do the combo? Like I've literally. Because I do think like Twitter, those like explain your indie game in 3 words, those are fun and they're a good way to get them out there. But because in those posts, you guys have seen those posts, right? Where it's always like a 30-second gameplay clip or something. That clip does way more heavy lifting than the describe your game in like 3 words. So definitely like figure out what your strength is and figure out how to make sure the right people see it. That's the less rambly version of this answer. What about you, man?
Also, if you're sending email pitches here and there, if we get it once, it's enough. You don't actually need to spam, because yes, there'll be the occasional time where we can miss an email here and there, but when you actually engage a conversation with someone, especially when you do the thing offline, most likely we're going to remember you. That's for sure, whether good or ill.
I'd say you get one. You get one reminder.
Okay, one reminder. Okay, one extra reminder. Yes. Yeah. But generally, as one has mentioned, keep the pitch short, sweet, and also memorable. And yeah, pictures always say 1,000 words, because there are so many people emailing me. But when I see that one GIF that shows me, hey, it's an animal sim with a really, it's basically just, there's an indie game that actually takes the concept of the Animal Crossing fishing minigame and turn that into an entire game. Yeah, that's going to get me hooked, basically. So again, pictures, GIFs, that's very important to actually show up as well. And social media, again, you have an account, and all this is actually done really free. So it's not like you're spending money on social media to actually spread your word around here and there and to get anyone's attention. Most likely, you at least get one person just remembering it.
Twitter Blue for your game.
Exactly.
Oh, I got one more. Hold on. This is for more for event related stuff. I don't think I've seen this discussed very much. Anytime if you're exhibiting your show at like Level Up KL, Tokyo Game Show, why are you so rich? Or like even Indie Jam, message us by email and say, book an appointment with us. Like, this is the unspoken rule I see no one ever talk about. Book an appointment with the media. Just say like, hey, would you be free to check out our game at 1 p.m. and da 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 da. Like, I can't speak for John, but for me, this will push your game up like in priority because I'd be like, oh yeah, they told me to come at 1 p.m. I'll come at 1 p.m. Whereas, because you've had the appointment stuff as well, right? Yeah, exactly. So, like, how many of you guys actually did the dishes when you said you would? Never, never. But if someone said, when I come home at 2 p.m., those dishes better be done, you'd be like, yes, ma'am. I'm gonna do.
Journalists respect the deadline, and if you're given a time, yes, we will respect it. That was a good rule that both of us have, or people in our field have actually been doing per se.
And also, we're just messes personally.
Yeah, having something being said, actually, that's a goal per se, and we have lots of that happening.
I do have to echo that because we were at Gamescom and it pays to reach out to the media and just book their time to check out your game.
Yeah,
Like, seriously.
It literally costs us nothing.
Yeah. And I think just to add a little bit of event organizer perspective as well, I think even having spoken to the wonderful people at Indie Wave Makers who organize the Gamescom Asia indie area, right? They can do their level best to sort of nominate games that, hey, you're a media partner, these are the games that you should check out, right? But you can't really rely on just being there at the event and hoping that the media will cover your game. If you just take the extra step and you see that, hey, these are the officially announced media partners, or in the case of bigger events that have Meet to Match or any business apps where they are labeled as media owners or publications or writers, just reaching out to them and saying, hey, do you want to check out my thing? They're not likely to say no most of the time. Because it does help filter, who we want to check out on the floor. So that's really helpful. I also had a really good time with Let's Build Dungeon.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff too. Let's do that.
So moving on a little bit, I'm just gonna jump a little bit ahead, right? Because besides besides promoting on social media, promoting online and through their own channels, right? There's also events like this, and there's also online events. So how effective are those events actually in getting your attention as a media?
Very actually. All these, either it's offline or online. I'm going to focus on the offline since this is an offline event. It's easier. Because putting a face to the name is always very important. Meeting people physically and all that. Yes, talking online, Twitter and all that, and especially if you're talking to someone who's basically an ocean away on a continent, it's going to be tough to fly down and all that. But at the end of the day, if you can somehow make the time and the budget to hopefully meet up with these people face to face, just take it whenever you can. Get a sponsorship and all that. Or if it's within the region itself, a plane ticket. This kind of business expenditures is very important in the long run because it's about just cementing the relationship here and there. At the end of the day, I still want to see the person that I'm talking to who created my favorite game at the end of the day still. And also from the game creator side, you want to see the people covering a game too. Just build a rapport and all that. It's who you know, and also networking is always going to be, I guess it's like the only constant that you can take outside of gaming per se, like business networking and all that. At the end of the day, it is still putting the face where meeting out people, finding out what they likes and all that. You don't necessarily have to be their best friend per se, but it does help that, there's a bit of a professional rapport to it and all that. And also talking about things you like per se. It's just some bonding thing that also works out. And not to say that they're going to cover your game favorably. If your game is terrible, they will call it out if they're doing their jobs. But at the same time, it's good to know that they're doing their jobs, per se, because this is a person's opinion you can trust.
Yeah, if I can just add a bit to that, right? I think ultimately the role of media is an amplification machine, right? And when you reach out to one media and you're able to meet them in person and make an impression, right? People among media talk to each other. Media talk to content creators. Media talk to other developers and organizers as well. And if you make a good impression on select number of people, you don't actually know how far your game is gonna travel. Because I've definitely had moments, even recently at Gamescom, where I played a game that really impressed me, and then I immediately told somebody else who worked in games media or somebody else who organizes events,
It'd
go
be
and
like,
check out
yo,
this
this game
game.
is fire, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because ultimately we like games and we want to spread the good word about games.
I
So
was
if
literally
you're
doing that with
yeah.
the student game jams. One of the games that I really like. I've literally been going around like dragging people to the booth, like, yo, play this now.
Yeah,
But
and your thoughts on physical online events?
yeah, no, I think physical is way better. And this is gonna sound very shallow, but making your booth look nice is such a game changer. Look, Kriegsfront Tactics has these little 3D printed robots that they put at their booth sometimes. I'm not gonna say that was what first got me interested into the game, but I'd say Kriegsfront Tactics is a really good game. And I think like yeah, that whole like showmanship element definitely helps grab attention. Um, uh, um, I'm trying to think because there's one at Gamescom Asia as well. They had like a giant 3D printed figure of one of their characters. One of the games here has a 3D printed barber chair. Basically, leverage 3D printing. That's a great indie marketing tip, I guess.
Yeah, and I just want to call back a bit to Juan Hasmir's talk yesterday as well, because he emphasized that ultimately as game developers, you're entertainers. And I think even beyond the game now, marketing is so important, right? You have to extend the entertainment factor for marketing even to things like physical showcases, or if you're doing an online one, I constantly think of Building Relationships by Tanat and watching him during the online showcase, and immediately it being the only game on my mind because the way that he spent his 30 seconds in front of those millions of eyeballs was so memorable to me and outstanding. So I think, even outside of your game, you have to think about how you're presenting your game in front of media, in front of the public, etc., etc.
Yeah. Like we've both mentioned, offline events are still important. I think that was one. I mean, I don't remember the game from Tokyo Game Show, but I do remember the booth they set up. It's basically a triangle pyramid with an eye in the middle, a Suensha game. It's a pixel adventure title that's coming out next year. I may not remember the name, but I do remember.
Join the Illuminati, bro.
Yeah. But I do remember that, yes, that booth itself out there was in public, and that's actually more than enough for me to actually want to go out there and just Google it and just find out what this game is about per se. Now, they're important. You don't need a huge budget to make your game stand out, but as you mentioned before, the Kriegsfront Tactics, the 3D printing thing, that's enough to get people just mildly curious. You just want that little bit, just that little foot in the door to get through, and then you're okay from there, and just gotta continue that from there on out.
Yeah. And also like Unyielder had like a like scoreboard for people. Like every time you played the game, they would record your time, and they had a leaderboard. So people were playing that game out of spite. That's a game that's a marketing tactic you wanna leverage. It's like to get people going. Like, no, I'm gonna beat like Jacob Rees-Mogg or whatever in first place. Yeah.
Angular is great, and I did not make it anywhere close that leaderboard.
Me neither, but I woulda.
Okay, wonderful. I do want to hard pivot into this next question, right? Because I think it's a slightly controversial but important question that people who read media might be interested in knowing, right? Because there's this constant myth that every single game review that comes out is something that you're paid to write. So I want to know, how often are you actually paid to write a game review? And do you think it's necessary for an indie game who really like aggressively wants to get out there to put money into paid reviews?
If I were actually paid to do reviews, I would have like 5 boats by now, the Klang Valley, Klang Port, and all that. Yeah, but seriously, we don't. All the copies that we got for games are mostly because, hey, you want to cover this game early, or you want to cover it on the day itself, or have early access and all that. You still want to maintain a relationship per se, but they know damn well that whether you're a big publisher or an indie developer or even something like Yizbird or even Devolver Digital, they do respect integrity in media and content creators. Nobody is getting paid to review these things. Advertising exists, yes, and there's still that management here and there, but I believe the biggest story that happened in terms of like reviews and advertising was probably a while back when GameSpot reviewed Kane and Lynch. That was a while back. It involved a bunch of journals who reviewed a game badly. I mean, 7 out of 10 isn't a bad review, but in the game space, it's like a death knell or whatnot. And then because of the advertising being put inside, those writers left GameSpot and they formed Giant Bomb. That's a very rare occurrence. But at the end of the day, it's generally, yes, we are getting these games as part of the work process and all that, early and all that. That's all free and all that. But at the same time, we are supposed to do our jobs to play this and review it and critique it as a product and whatnot.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this practice is also kind of a moderation tool, right? Because you want your game to be covered, so you give a key to a games media, right? But it's also that you want them to have a meaningful opinion in it that isn't affected by something like money, right? And that's why even from indie games all the way to like bigger publishing houses, they'll just give keys, and at the most they'll give, like you said, early access.
Yeah.
But usually there's not a price tag attached. Correct?
Yeah, and a pro tip for those publishers who actually give the games on the day itself, and if you know you haven't done anything wrong, that's probably a good sign that the game might have various controversial views, or maybe the game isn't that good.
I think we see that with AAA sometimes.
For movies as well too. Yeah.
Oh, man.
But yeah, no, it's overall like yeah, good job like bringing up the keys thing, because a lot of people say, oh, but you get the games for free. I'm like, yeah, and it's for work. Like, bruh, have you try that? So people are always just like, oh, you know, you're reviewing your favorite game. That must be so good for you. I'm like, no, nothing makes you hate a game more than like realizing that you have a 2-week deadline, or one week. I'm sorry. But yeah, no. On the topic of are we paid to do it? No. That's just not how it works. And anyone who claims so is kind of a moron. Let's be real with you.
Well, I'd like to thank all the writers who actually are pressing on to do a 1-week review for a 100-hour game. Those are the real champions right there. Yes.
We see a woo from the back of the room. We see your struggle. We get it.
Yeah, keep up the struggle, man.
Okay, I just want to wrap with one last question before we open it to the floor, right? Because Indie Jam is a primarily Southeast Asian focused indie gaming event, right? What are your thoughts on how Southeast Asian audiences have been receiving specifically Southeast Asian made games recently? From your reader base or from maybe numbers that you've seen on social media? Do you have any insights to share on that?
I think there's still a lot of room to like grow, because your average layperson is still the bro FIFA bro, aku main FIFA je bro. Like there's still a lot of conversion that needs to be done, and just like one Hazmir was saying yesterday, I think we're still very much in the uphill battle side of this. But on the other hand, I think we've also got a lot of the growth we're seeing in the indie industry is coming from people who want to make games, which is cool. But when we're talking about reaching more mainstream audiences, there's still quite a bit of work to do. But I think the community that we already have is really cool. They're very open, and like it's nice seeing that these people appreciate the work that goes into making indie games, you know. People be like, yo, this is sick, and this came from a studio in Indonesia or in Malaysia, you know. I think, but overall, I also want to see that crowd get bigger and bigger. What about you, man?
Oh, I'm just adding on to what you said. While SEA game developers are doing a great job with working and getting the game out there, they also have to remember they are competing not just in SEA, but also the entire world. Because for every Until Then or Space Between Unbound that's out, there's going to be a Japanese game developer or even a European guy who has made Feldavec, or even like I mentioned, the Balatro game I mentioned earlier. That's done by one guy. That's very impressive, honestly, and that came out this year. It's the entire world you're facing. Yes, you are, okay, I guess Cuisine will be a good example for what I'm going to bring up. They are definitely getting all the love from Singapore because that's where they're from, indie support and all that, country and all that. But they are doing the hardest to make sure that they're going out in places like, I believe, Penny Arcade Expo, and lately, Tokyo Game Show to get their game out in the small booths, in the cheapest, whatever they can get that's affordable at the time, going around and doing business while they're having their workers promote the game on the show floor. The CEO, I believe, is actually doing behind the scenes stuff, meeting up with different publishers here and there, securing the future for not just the game that's coming out next year, but probably the next few other projects per se, because the future is always uncertain about these things. The whole point is you are still, all the game developers in Southeast Asia, you are competing with the rest of the world. But you are still getting support here, but that's according to that talk that I saw on Twitter. Thanks to 20M for the picture and all that. And to see the stats where it's only like, what, I believe 5% from Asia only cares about No Straits Road, whereas like what, 20-30% from America actually are buying and playing the game. It is still a long way to go. I don't think that 5% is going to grow that much, but which is why game developers from Asia, you kind of need to just go beyond just from your own home country to promote your game. You still need to do the work out there if you can afford it. Otherwise, hey, Twitter or B-Sky, B-Sky, Facebook, whatever social media platform you have right there, that's still the most helpful tool to get your game across to different people. Who knows? That too. I mean, who knows? You might actually, your indie game might actually get hook, line, and sinker by a guy from Rock, Paper, Shotgun, and it can blow up from there. It's rare, but it can happen. It can happen.
That's an interesting strategy. I'm aware of that. I do like that we've covered sort of a spectrum of what indie developers can do, because we know that indie developers work with a varying, spectrum of budget as well. Not everyone can go international that easily, do physical booths, but I think there's a lot of options in between right now, which is quite good. Like I've had the
forums as
pleasure
well are also pretty useful.
Oh,
I forgot
yeah.
to mention.
Like I've had the pleasure of speaking to a couple of the developers, of the Southeast Asian developers, about pandemic versus post-pandemic and what it's been like for promoting games pre and after, right? And the big difference is that post-pandemic, there's a lot more avenues for online showcases that no longer rely on you needing to be in the country for that showcase. And that's a really good avenue you can look into. But I think consensus across the floor is that if you're able to afford it, or if you're able to work towards it, still having that physical connection and doing the back end work, being on the floor at international conventions is still gonna go really far, even in this digital age.
I think we have to thank, that's probably the one good thing that came out of the pandemic. It made online meetings and presentations viable. And still continuing on to this day. I mean, I think there were like 1 or 2 game previews from different companies that have been happening online. I just have to basically just get up at 6 a.m. That's about it.
Yep.
Oh.
But yeah,
No,
go ahead.
that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's all. Like, it's never underestimate the power of being physically there to be like, yo, please play my game. If not, I will be homeless.
Yeah. I think having that like physical connection and being able to see the person face to face, like I think it's so underrated these days, But actually
people
being
want to
able
see people.
Yeah.
They don't want to see Discord calls. They want to see people.
I think ultimately it's nice that it comes back down to the human connection at the end of the day. And with that, shall we open the questions to the floor if there are any questions? Sorry, I think Marcus has to run to the mic.
So, do we have any first questions? Anyone? Oh, right off the bat, here you go.
Thanks, man. Yeah, maybe just a quick one on my side. And Nat, I think I love the question that you asked maybe midway through this panel. Maybe just broaden the question is, does it pay to cover indie games? And I'm not talking about a Stardew Valley. I'm not talking about an Undertale. I'm not talking about like these gigantic, like even a Coral Island from Indonesia, right? Like those do numbers specifically from a click perspective or from a view perspective. Both of the publications that you guys work for cover the AAA side, arguably, the high-end AA side, as well as super grassroots independent games. From a data standpoint, where does your publication seize the clicks for indie games? how do you rationalize using your time covering a smaller game when you have an opportunity like, a Final Fantasy 16 coming out? John, would love to hear some of your thoughts, specifically from the KKP side, where the data shows. Like, does it pay to cover indie games? Like, are people paying attention? And Juan Emerald as well.
Oh, all right. Oh, okay. In terms of data, it is going to pale in comparison to covering a big game, that's for sure. It's a given. But we do want to actually, I guess it's because of, again, it's mostly for our personal interest and also the connection you give. Like, oh, maybe this developer kind of needs their time in the sun per se. And they have an interesting concept, an interesting hook for the game. Like, if the X factor of the game particularly sells me, especially as someone who like, oh, if maybe it's a fighting game or an action title or something that's just really quick, then yes, I will go out my way to cover it per se. But in terms of data for viewership, it's better than zero lah. Let's just say that. It's still some. I'm not saying it's going to beat something like Final Fantasy 16, but there is going to be some interest in covering it, especially when it's something that can get some sort of like home ground advantage. Like if it's a game made in Malaysia, yes, people are going to hopefully talk about it and bring it up, especially if there's a culture aspect tacked on to the mechanics of a game that is sound. And it's ultimately up to the writer, myself or one, who actually has to make the story interesting for people to pick up. So it's also a skill thing as well that we have to work on too.
Yeah, so as depressing as it is, unfortunately, like numbers-wise, no, it's not gonna beat like AAA stuff because that's things people are already interested in. But the way I see it, covering indie games is kind of like an investment into a better future where people do care about indie games. Like, because right now, right now, if no one covers it, no one's ever gonna care about it. But if we go around, we say like, hey, check out this stuff happening over here, you are going to get, if even one more person goes and checks it out, that's a net positive. And also, I think the other underrated bit is that it's also just kind of fun to write about indie games. Like I said, there's a lot of fresh new ideas happening in the indie scene, and me as a writer, I'm like, yo, I want to check this out. Like I'm doing this for myself. I don't want to be the kind of jackass who says things like indie games have no budget for marketing, so I don't want to cover them. So like we're all here because we love the industry, and I think going into deep dark places and looking for cool, interesting things is an expression of that love that only the games media can do, really.
Can I also add to your point? So it's not just one singular games media. I'm talking about all of us. Like, it doesn't matter if yes, rivalry is all great and all, but I rather that everyone from a particular country for media cover a particular game that we either like or just needs more attention or whatnot. Because, like you mentioned, if we don't cover it, who else will?
Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you have any other questions on the public side? No? Okay, then I guess I actually have one. So let's say I give you a situation where there's at least 5 games you have to cover in the span of like 2 weeks. And then maybe there's like 2 big titles. It could be Final Fantasy VII, whatever the third game is going to be. Then the next 3 are homegrown, like maybe local games, which you think will have the potential to go big. Where is this going to be a priority list when let's not even say 2 weeks. Let's say 1 week, and all of them have the same deadline.
It happens more often than you think.
Yeah, which is fair. I think people needs to know that this happens in this industry that a lot of people don't talk about, because obviously from the consumer side we only see like the news article, and you guys talking about it. We don't see what happens on the back end. So obviously when there's going to be like 5 different games, this is the situation. What is going to be your priority list for each and every one of you? You guys don't have to have the same answer.
All right, so it comes down to what those games are, because if those are 2 JRPGs, like, I was never gonna finish them in 1 week, man. That shit's that shit's gonna get delayed, and that 1 week is better spent covering 3 short indie games instead of doing 2 back-to-back heavy JRPGs. A lot of it is just time management, man. You have to look deep inside yourself and say, what can I realistically deliver within a deadline? Because I think what a lot of people don't realize in this industry is you have to be able to, you basically triage your time. Like, okay, what can we get done? What can be delayed a little bit? And what can be pushed really, really, really far back?
How much sleep I can take out of my time?
Yeah, ideally we don't want to do that because we want to live to see Persona 6, but you know.
Okay. Okay, we have a Persona stand here.
What about you, John?
I guess it really depends on the editor who wants whichever gets prioritized. But in my case, I'm the editor, so let's just say I'm given 5 of these titles. I will have to prioritize the shorter ones. But if let's just say if it's a big JRPG where I know that it's going to get views on my channel or the website, that may have to be prioritized because I know I'm going to be fighting everyone else. It's, again, this is not an easy decision to make. If you have to put someone has to be last among all the 5. I mean, it'll be great if I can get the shorter game, but it's really up to the situation and whether the particular title and also what, hopefully the length of the title is actually shorter. It also depends on the length and how fast you can complete it. So it's, I guess, type lah.
And there's also the other thing as well of like, you have to understand if you're in English media in this industry, you are by default competing with Kotaku. So, and what this means is that sometimes you don't really have to pay attention to the AAAs because you're like, is anyone gonna read this, or are they just gonna share the Kotaku article around? I may as well put this time into something that's going to fall through their radar. So yeah, depressing but also reality. Oh yeah.
Yeah, if I can just add a little bit to that, right? I think especially with the Magic Rain's role as a media outlet, because we're not fully operating in the game space, right? For us, decision making comes down to, you know, what can we get out the fastest, and then what has sort of like a hook, right? Because our publication is small to the point where we cannot be putting ourselves to compete with the giants, right? So in that case, it actually kind of, you do want to look at the indie things and you want to look at the things that have really interesting hooks. Like, I covered the Jollibee horror game because I thought it was really interesting and it would get somebody to click, you know? And I think that's to answer a little bit of the previous question as well from Arif, right? I think that has been the evolution of media's role over time, right? Rather than just, I call it like the SEO evolution, right? Previously, maybe like 10 years ago, we could write just so-and-so review and then publish it and then it'll get some, you know, reads and everything. But these days, you kind of have to dip into the SEO and the marketing of it a bit. And how can we angle it not just to get us clicks, but also to paint the game in a really interesting light. So then that's where USP for the game becomes interesting. The one sentence pitch of the game becomes really important, right? But yeah, thank you for the question.
Okay, yeah, the one sentence hook is always going to be important. So I think that was my question. Does anyone have one more, maybe? Or, okay, then maybe I...
It doesn't have to be about games. Just ask anything.
Ask us about favorite food.
Oh, okay, that's... What?
Name
three
three
kueh.
you take this.
I don't know what you mean when you give me the mic. Say, oh, you take this. I don't like this implication. Okay.
It's putting you out on the spotlight, man.
Okay. Important scholarly opinion here. Is putu maya a kueh? Because was this onde putu mayam curry pap?
Are you
Yeah.
sure?
Again, pending judicial review on whether putu mayam is a kueh or not.
Does that answer your question over there at the back? Ask all of them. Okay, okay. I guess Natalie will go last. She gets to listen to the rest for answers first.
Curry puff sardine, curry puff chicken.
Wait, hold on. No. That's not how it works here. No. Curry puff as one. There's the other two.
Kueh lapis and onde onde.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm more of a savory guy. So that's why I put sweets last.
It's okay. I'm glad you're not asking me because I wouldn't be able to answer this. So Natalie was able to hear the answers from the first two. So
Why have you done this to me? This is horrible because I know what they are, but I don't know their names.
Tasty one, the tasty one, and the one.
The delicious one, yeah. Let me try.
wait, what do you?
Appam. Appam is not kueh.
Are you guys sure? Maybe this is his strategy to get
Okay.
you guys cancelled today.
Putu piring?
Can one more?
Kueh
Two more?
lapis?
Kueh lapis. Okay.
What is the one with the blue rice?
Oh, she's
no,
asking.
not nasi kerabu.
Wait,
The
wait, wait. He's
kueh
not.
with
He's
the
not wrong
blue
though.
rice.
He's not wrong though. Nasi kerabu is not wrong.
Isn't there one that's like mata? Oh my god. So the real lesson here is that we all have to go and play the Malaysian games that feature all the kueh so that we as Malaysians can be educated on the real name of all these kueh. And with that, that was the panel. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so
Totally
much
does.
to Jonathan, Amirul, and Natalie, of course. Very insightful information coming out from very different perspectives, especially coming out of this. Can we give them a quick round of applause, guys? Thank you.